If you live with chronic anxiety or panic attacks, if you have rampant thoughts, if you overthink, if you have trouble sleeping at night, or at night you fall asleep and you wake up with overthinking and then you have trouble falling asleep as examples, then your body's speaking to you. Once you are at a place in your life where you kind of like have everything that you want, you know, you finish school or you're at the job that you're supposed to love, and there seems to be something missing in your life. Or every time you arrive to it, you always feel like that something or someone is attempting to grab something from you. You feel like you're missing something, and if you don't get it now, that something's going to happen. It's almost like this pit, this like darkness that you walk with. This is very, very common. More commonly in women, because women tend to be more tapped in to their emotional state body, which is power. And men tend to be more trapped in their conscious mind, which means that they're separated from their mind to their heart chakra. They think that they're not oftentimes, because maybe the man is the provider of an entire family, and then kids and everybody, they love him. That doesn't mean that he's heart soul connected. It means that oftentimes that he may be imbalanced and working and living off of his head. And when you're not living and guiding from your heart, the separation is that the man becomes the provider, and this is my job, and this is what I must do, and it kind of interlaces between what a divine masculine would do and the sick masculine, the sick patriarchy of what you were taught. And there are templates that are interwoven eloquently so, that'll keep a man feeling like he's doing due diligence for his family. And his family, of course, if it was me too, man, if I was his wife, I'd be like, keep going, dude, if you want to keep feeding me. Because it's like a kid, right? If you take away my powers and you say I do it for you, at first I'm going to fight, but after a while I give in, because it's the easy road. And it's kind of like humans' nature to follow the easiest or the easy road. And the easy road can be often a misconception of being like water. Because there's such thing as being like water, and water in Chinese medicine is phlegmy, is mucus, is a disconnection between your empowered water. So there is a disconnection there. The majority of people who live with chronic anxiety and depression and panic attacks per se tend to be women. And it's not because men don't have it, it's that men tend to, again, live in their minds. So they have a more dominant way of suppressing these emotions. So they release it in a different tendency, most commonly with anger, rage, or lack of. Like maybe I'm going to hit the gym and I'm going to work out, I'm going to play a lot of basketball, which I know I say in so many videos, do that, that's your freeing self. But then you get addicted to the medicine, and you never really, and because it feels good when you come home from playing that sport or golfing. How do you say playing golf or golfing? Playing golf. And you come home and you feel this sense of camaraderie with your brethren and peace, and then you come home and it's like everything's cool and breezy. And that can again interlace within the sick masculine and being a divine masculine. Divine masculine, quite simply, it means center. It means heart-centered. So in the Tao Te Ching, which is a classic in Chinese Taoism, speaks very specifically about the soul. And the soul, as in Spanish soul, or in Latin per se, S-O-L, S-O-U-L, soul, is the personification of your inner light, your inner liveliness. It's what connects your heart chakra with, as a bridge between your higher rational thinking mind and your lower reproductive instinctual mind. Within that transitioning between the trinity of your livelihood, of your existence per se, that your emotional state body is in its natural state. And I don't mean refined, meaning somebody is a master alchemist and they know how to divinely work with emotions in a highly refined nature, but in its natural nature, just by being a human, your emotions are there to keep you in what I would say homeostasis is. Homeostasis means that's not always being healthy, but even in a state of feeling sick, right? That's your body's attempt of getting healthy. So that could mean a very healthy immune system if you have a fever, and then when the fever breaks, it's the worst feeling in the world, you know? It forces your body instinctually, that's the intelligence of your body, to calm, to relax, and it forces your mind not to think. So hence you get really sick. You feel bedridden because your body or your conditioning, you won't listen. So you're going to keep working and you're going to keep overpowering, and your immune system's trying to heal something, some form of inner pathology, such as an exterior invasion of some kind. So once you start changing the conversation, first and foremost with your mind, in relationship to anxiety, panic attacks, overthinking, erratic behavior, even if it's not externally expressed, but you're always masking it within your inner world, right? Crying, screaming. There's actually nothing wrong with the expression such as crying or losing it per se, because that's your body's attempt of releasing the excess. And as I've said to clients over the past years, I always say that when you're experiencing such issues, I always say that they're not necessarily issues, they're like the bells and the whistles of your power. And the more powerful you are, then the stronger your bells and whistles. The challenge for you would be to redevelop, if not for the first time, a conversation of the very things that you're afraid of, such as, imagine all of a sudden, and this happens to people all the time, you're teaching a class in school, you're riding a bus because that's your line of work, and all of a sudden, for the first time in your life, you experience a panic attack. And for those that know, it feels like you're about to die. It feels like you're going to either faint or you're having a heart attack. You have no idea. And then in your mind, if you're at least 30 years old, you're already thinking that this is the end of your life, because you're thinking like you're 70 in your head because 30 is old, right? Because that's your natural fear. So what your sympathetic nervous system now takes these actual registers of your brain, so your mind's attempt to trying to make a connection as to why you're having a panic attack. And hence you will find yourself collapsing in the moment and calling the paramedics, right? Most commonly, especially if you're in the middle of work, you start hyperventilating and certain things that are happening. However, there are people who live with chronic states of panic attacks like that. And I mean for years. I've had clients in their 30s and 40s, commonly, ever since like college per se, teens to the early 20s, living with it, sometimes even daily or cyclically. So the most important thing is to reestablish and empower yourself that you may not know how yet, but that panic attack, that anxiety attack, right? Constantly living in fear, constantly living like you're supposed to please someone or a group of people within your line of work, which is kind of like how people run businesses these days, right? You're always having to please your boss, and you just find yourself in this negative feedback loop of repetition. And that's just as horrible as having a panic attack, at least as far as the long-term effects are of your emotional and even physical state body. Once you establish a connection of reprogramming your mind simply by having a conversation with yourself, even especially if you may want to write it down in a book and put it in your diary and in your own way, in your own words, so you can repeat it every day, so that you can make it conscious to yourself every day, just like you're splashing your face with cool water in the morning. You read it because what you want to do is you want to establish a connection of changing the paradigm of what you've been taught as to what anxiety and panic attacks are. And it's very similar to people who are neurodivergent and they have been classified as being or having ADD, ADHD. And under rare circumstances, there can be something of a chronic issue there, not as common meaning. However, most people are misidentified, misclassified, misdiagnosed with power that they were born with, for being neurodivergent or having ADD. It means that you have a very powerful mind that's not being utilized within its nature, because humanity at a state and in the moment, there is not, some curious kids here, humanity is not prepared to receive you. And the lesson for you was that it wasn't meant for you to acclimate, because humanity doesn't understand how your neurodivergent mind thinks, and how the neural networks were meant for you to actually restructure it at will with the way you intuitively know. See, that was a test for you at birth that was never taught to you because that was the point. And I know that these are the kind of people I tend to attract. Being classified, again, as neurodivergent or having autism or ADD or ADHD, and yet you're here receiving this message, per se, you are meant to disassemble the realities and realities that were taught to you one by one, starting with your family, your parents, your school system, your spouses, your friends. And once you start to identify that you're not wrong, it's actually that they're not equipped to understanding you, then you start accepting accountability, as I said in past videos, meaning that you account for everything, good, bad, and ugly, including your panic attacks, including your anxiety attacks, for being a human being. And in time, as you're taking notes and you're assessing yourself, and you're booking with me if you feel calling, because we all need somebody at some point. Within one's aloneness, even in hermit mode, we all need someone. I had to learn how to maybe expand my needing someone with not just humans, but with deities such as angels, guides, insects, spiders. And once I started to see, because that was my journey and that was my path, once I started to see that there wasn't a difference between a cicada coming to me, or in my last video, a purple stone centipede speaking to me, right? Then I wouldn't be able to expand on my neurodivergency, because the conversation, as people are saying that we're living now in the 4D, which is in the in-between realities within our split between 3 and 5, because Earth is in her natural 5 habitat. That's her natural consciousness, and they say that's how. But the perceivable universe is also in its natural state, and its contraction, expansion of existing. It's 5D, right? And then the experiment of this, this collapsed timeline of the 3D experience, I would say experiment / was almost like a hijacking of the nature of Mother Earth's expansion. Why? Because you have to think of scientists and how they do things even here. I mean, look at the magic jab and all that. The whole point of experimenting and in a very sick masculine sense of what science is that the test subject is not going to know, because they're going to test against humans, right? They're going to have different test subjects. Maybe a group knows, maybe a group doesn't know, and a group will never know, right? And from there, they create a consensus. Why? Because there's a healthy sense of curiosity, and there's a sick sense of curiosity due to fear. So whether you're in your lower mind because you're fear, because you're a scientist, because you're looking to survive, because you're a scientist and you're seeing things within fear, and that's your scope of seeing, then of course you're looking for your actual survival, right? And you're thinking, well, if a couple million people die now, they're gonna thank me later, because the way I'm seeing things, we're gonna save the entire timeline, which is utter ridiculous, because this timeline is supposed to collapse to the 5. So the experiment is what's supposed to collapse. So for people who are ride or die with any experiment, being a person, any experiment with religion, politics, anything that takes you away from you and source as not being separate, has to and will collapse by nature. Timelines are different because we're multidimensional. That's why there's a lot of karma imprints that are happening to the collective in record ways right now. Because if you haven't harvested by now, well, the karma is the universe's way, an attempt to try to get you to balance, to get you to register in a more intimate perspective from your experiences of the way that you have not been able, or the way you haven't planted your seeds. So you are harvesting now. This is a time where people are harvesting what they reaped. So if you reap nothing, well, you're going to feel like there's nothing happening in your life. And that could be your karma. It's not good or bad. And you might find peace there. You start building villages like that until a couple generations later, you start getting sick of that. And that's the whole point. That's how individually with free will we evolve. And to keep our freedom that way, right? To keep our freedom that way, as we de-evolve down from the 5D, and now we're attempting to establish as a human collective back to our natural state, this is what's happening. This is why ebb and flow exists. This is why duality exists. See, conscious flow with unity consciousness, with source. This doesn't have a name. There's no God or whatever name you want to give him or her or it, right? Or a prayer outside of yourself. That's all part of the experience of your separation from who you've always been. And within this hiccup of an experience of being a human, maybe your experience is that you're being experimented on. Because the supreme aspect of your subconscious mind knows that you're eternal. So you're just, you're going through these experiences so that you can chisel something of a bigger aspect of something that you've been working with that's a lot more extreme in your actual reality beyond the dream state realm. And I know that it's a hard thing to kind of comprehend for many people, but being a human being right now is an illusion. There are mirrors. Yes, you're physical, and that's why the illusion's impossible to prove or to disprove without, again, the collaboration of yin or yang. For as long as they keep you separate with an attempt to come into union or with other attempts to contrast, and you're developing all these other new kind of like synthetic forms of sacred geometry, well, these forms of sacred geometry wouldn't have existed if it weren't for these, if it wasn't for these scientists that you're calling God. See, the God that I'm gonna keep this part short because I feel led to say this, but the God that you say that created the world in 7 days, 7 layers, 7 ways, was an extreme conscious being. An expansion of all of us as far as soul, consciousness, and collectiveness. But religions have been created to pray to those sources. That once you see them, they're very evolved scientists that are not capable of doing what you do, which is why you became the experimented, or the being experimented on, because they lost a part of themselves that you have. But yet you're waiting for Anunnaki to come so that they could teach you a thing or two, but you're the one that's the pearl. They're separated from you because you're separated from self. And once you're connected with Source, by them coming to you, because you're waiting for them to come, or you're waiting for Jesus to come too. These are like different now, the layers of like, I'm waiting for someone to save me. Daddy, I need you. Big man, like 20 feet. I'm building all this muscle, being 5'10", you know what I mean? It's not big enough, so I got to be able to see somebody else even bigger than me. I always got to get bigger. That's sick masculine. Daddy got to come here and save you. So it's not a surprise that the sick feminine, she's trying to get healthy now. She has no choice but to get healthy. And that's why there's a separation with relationships, collectively speaking. The karma is that anybody that played house for thousands of years, there's a divine side of that, right? Because there is a union between masculine and feminine. There is. But in order for that to happen, there has to be a dismantling. And this is not separate from anxiety attacks and panic attacks. Because it's not that you're not able to see beyond the veil. It's that you're afraid to. Because you know that once you start to see beyond the veil of the illusion that you have been created, saying that other people created it around you, because you failed to place accountability on yourself, I'm talking to you, then the whole world's going to collapse around you because you're not accountable for it. So you have no control, you have no say into the collapse. To account for it is to mold and to shape the collapse that you cannot control. Because you are the author, the creator of your experiences. And as you expand on that creation, the shedding must happen. And you don't know how yet to change the conversation between your mind and your heart. Using the throat chakra of affirmations in the moment. Not affirmations of manifestation, but manifestations of alignment. Means here and now. As I speak, it is done. And with no control, I allow what needs to happen within my inner journey and my outer, never to be separate again. To manifest is to wish and to pray for it to happen later on. And it may happen, and it may not. You have no control over it. You see how the term control does not exist on the first version of how I spoke versus the second. Control or lack of control, yin or yang, ceases to exist when you are in alignment with the moment or in the moment. And to arrive to that, which is that simple, is to honor the sacred nature of your anxiety, that panic attack, because it's a collapse that's ready to happen, and you're afraid to allow a version of you to collapse, because the same divine forces that you keep praying for are here helping you collapse it, and you're fighting them. You're fighting aspects of you, saying it's not. And as chronic states, then it's going to represent other people to kind of like deliver you your karma. And then we're going to play that game and that template in that actual archetypical pattern to say, yeah, you're being served karma because you screwed up and now it's your turn. And yeah, that might be all true, man. You could write a whole bunch of psychology books on that. But we must graduate to the deeper every single time. We can't even hold on to that, because that becomes another archetype to be used consciously, ready to collapse once it's done. And when you could breathe it into the moment, every single archetypical pattern to use as tools, that is living in the moment. Less my words, more of how you feel and I feel when we're sharing these moments in this video. There are recollaborations of alignment that are happening in the subconscious reality that you've already approved of before even finding this video. If you require to go deeper, PM me directly, check out my website, and that's where you can find my information. Panic attacks, anxiety attacks, cease to exist once you love yourself just enough to let go of either the distrust or the sense of disloyalty that you have within yourself. Your body's speaking to you. Qi is teaching you the very anatomy and physiology of the temple of your very own creation, reminding you that you're the author, pen to paper, mind to heart, the same. And the expression of that is heart to tongue. Not that you think that you're the living prayer. Observe being the living prayer as you speak into existence more of who you already are.